Jack Reynolds wiped down the worn wooden counter of his small bar, the dim glow of neon signs reflecting off the polished surface. It was late, the kind of late where even the most stubborn drunks had stumbled home, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the old jukebox. He exhaled, savoring the quiet. Outside, rain pattered against the streets of a city that never quite slept. Jack had lived here for years, long enough to see businesses rise and fall, long enough to know that trouble often arrived in the dead of night. And tonight, trouble had come knocking, across the galaxy, on a ship cloaked in the void of space. Commander Zyros reviewed the details of his latest assignment. A holographic projection displayed a simple image. Jack Reynolds, bartender, Earth. A man in his late 50s, graying at the temples, eyes that had seen too much. The data suggested an unremarkable existence. Small business owner, widower, no criminal record. Yet Zyros knew better than to trust appearances. "This is our target," Varric, his lead assassin, asked with thinly veiled skepticism. The alien warrior was taller than any human, his reptilian features unreadable in the dim blue glow of the projection. Zyros tapped the hologram, cycling through files too sensitive for open records. Reynolds was an intelligence operative long before he became a bartender. He knows things that should have died with him years ago. Varric tilted his head, considering the image. If he was so dangerous, why leave him alive? Zyros' expression remained impassive, because humans are creatures of sentiment. When his wife died, he disappeared. Intelligence assumed he had no reason to resurface. That was a mistake. Recently, information has surfaced. Data leaks pointing to knowledge that only he could possess. Varric's clawed fingers flexed at his sides. "You want him eliminated." Zyros nodded. Quietly, cleanly. Earth is a delicate place. They may not be part of the wider galactic order, but they are watched. His gaze hardened. "Make sure it looks like an accident." The assassin bowed his head slightly before turning away, already strategizing. Assassinations were a dance, one he had perfected over the years. A human bartender, retired or not, would pose no challenge. Back on Earth, Jack locked the front door of his bar, twisting the key with the ease of routine. The night was still, heavy with the scent of rain. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow shifting where no shadow should be. His instincts, dulled but not gone, prickled at the back of his neck. He turned, scanning the street, but saw nothing out of place. Just the usual city ghosts. Parked cars, flickering streetlights, a stray cat slinking into an alley. He exhaled, shaking his head. Maybe he was getting paranoid in his old age. He walked home through streets he knew well, the route etched into muscle memory. It wasn't far, just a few blocks. Past the convenience store where the owner always nodded in recognition. Past the diner that still served coffee too strong and pie too sweet. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Varric moved like a phantom, shifting between shadows, silent as the wind. He watched as Jack moved, noting the way the man glanced over his shoulder, the way his pace subtly adjusted, not as unaware as he should be. Interesting. Jack reached his apartment building, climbing the steps with the weight of a long day on his shoulders. He entered, shutting the door behind him, locking it out of habit more than necessity. The old place creaked, settling into the night. Varric stood outside, considering his options. A simple break-in and execution? No. Too crude. A staged accident? Perhaps. Humans were fragile in all the right ways. Gas leaks, falls, muggings gone wrong. The possibilities were endless. Yet something about this assignment felt off. Jack Reynolds was supposed to be a man running from his past. But Varric had seen men like this before. Men who carried the weight of old battles in their stance, in the way they moved. A bartender shouldn't have instincts like that. Inside his apartment, Jack poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in his glass. He should have felt safe. He didn't. Something gnawed at the edges of his mind, something old and familiar. Danger. He set the glass down untouched. Outside, Varric melted into the night, watching, waiting. The hunt had begun. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the city wrapped in a damp chill. Jack Reynolds stood behind the bar, hands busy with routine, but his mind elsewhere. The feeling from the night before still clung to him, like an itch he couldn't quite reach. Something had been out there, watching. He was sure of it, but he had no proof, nothing concrete, just a whisper of an old instinct he had long tried to bury. The door creaked open, and Jack glanced up, expecting a regular, maybe someone desperate for a drink before noon. Instead, a figure stepped inside, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he could handle whatever the world threw at him. Ryan Reynolds. Jack's son hadn't set foot in this bar in over a year. The last time had ended in an argument, sharp words neither of them had been willing to take back. Jack had never asked about the details of Ryan's work, only that it took him to places he couldn't talk about, left scars he wouldn't explain. Dad. Ryan's voice was steady, unreadable. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and set it aside. Didn't think I'd see you for another 6 months. Got a break, Ryan said, stepping closer, scanning the bar with eyes that missed nothing. Thought I'd stop by. Jack studied his son, noting the tension in his stance, the way he carried himself. He was always like this when he got back, half here, half still wherever the hell the government had sent him. Jack had stopped asking where a long time ago. You look like hell, Jack muttered, reaching for a glass. Drink. Ryan smirked, a rare crack in the hardened exterior. Coffee, if you've got it. Jack nodded, pouring a cup, sliding it across the bar. Ryan took it, fingers wrapping around the warmth, but he didn't drink. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if weighing whether to say what was really on his mind. Jack knew that look. He also knew his son well enough to wait. Ryan finally spoke. Something happened last night. Jack tensed but didn't let it show. Yeah, I was coming into the city late, Ryan continued. Had a weird feeling, like I was being followed. His fingers tapped absently against a coffee cup. Didn't see anyone, but I know when I'm being watched. Jack's stomach tightened. He thought about telling Ryan what had happened outside the bar, the shadow that had slithered away into the darkness. But something held him back, pride maybe, or the same stubbornness they both shared. Instead, he shrugged, city's full of ghosts. You've been out too long. You're seeing things. Ryan's gaze sharpened. Are you? Jack met his son's eyes, steady, unflinching. A challenge. Ryan held it for a long moment before finally looking away, taking a sip of coffee. They sat in silence, the kind only men who have seen too much can share. As afternoon bled into evening, Ryan stuck around, helping out in the bar, though he moved through the motions like a man waiting for something to happen. Jack watched him, seeing the way his eyes constantly tracked movement, the way his muscles stayed coiled ready, the habits of a soldier. When the last customer left, Jack locked the door, the bolt sliding into place with a dull finality. Ryan leaned against the bar, arms crossed. Tell me the truth, he said quietly. Jack didn't pretend to misunderstand. I don't know, he admitted. Something's off. I felt it last night. Ryan nodded, as if that was all the confirmation he needed. He set his cup down, straightened. Then I'm staying. Jack hesitated, torn between the relief of having his son close and the frustration of knowing Ryan wouldn't let this go. You don't need to, Jack said. Ryan's expression hardened. Yeah, I do. That night, as Jack turned off the lights and Ryan settled in the back room, neither of them saw the figure standing across the street, watching, waiting. Varric had expected an easy target. He hadn't expected him. The sun was an unforeseen complication, and complications had to be eliminated. The neon glow of the city flickered against the rain-slicked streets as Ryan moved through the shadows, his instincts razor-sharp. The hunt had begun. The syndicate had made their move, and now it was his turn. He wasn't just going to fight back. He was going to dismantle them piece by piece. Jack walked beside him, his face hardened by years of surviving enemies just like these. "They won't scatter," he muttered. "They'll double down." Ryan smirked. "Good. Makes them easier to find." They reached a rusted fire escape and climbed swiftly, their movements fluid and practiced. From the rooftop, the city stretched endlessly, lights shimmering like artificial stars. Below, syndicate enforcers patrolled the streets, hunting for ghosts. Ryan intended to make them believe in one. Jack pulled a cigarette from his jacket, but didn't light it. "You've got a plan?" Ryan knelt near the edge of the building, watching the nearest patrol. "Yeah, we bleed them." Jack exhaled. Always the direct approach. Ryan glanced at him. "You have a better one?" Jack chuckled, but said nothing. The first target was a syndicate safe house, an unmarked building nestled between warehouses, unassuming to the untrained eye. But Ryan recognized the reinforced doors, the hidden security cameras, the subtle signs of men who thought they were untouchable. He pulled a suppressed pistol and checked the magazine. "We go in quiet. Fast. No witnesses." Jack nodded. "Sounds like old times." They moved like wraiths, slipping through the alleyways until they reached the entrance. A guard stood outside, scanning the darkness. He never saw Ryan coming. One sharp twist, and his body crumpled soundlessly to the ground. Inside, the air was thick with stale smoke and tension. Syndicate enforcers lounged around a table, counting stacks of credits, weapons propped carelessly against the walls. They had no reason to expect trouble. Ryan stepped forward, his pistol whispering death before the first man could even react. Jack followed, his shotgun roaring once, twice, cutting down the rest before the alarm could be raised. Silence. Jack wiped blood from his sleeve. "They're getting sloppy." Ryan moved to the central terminal, pulling a small device from his pocket. Arrogance makes people lazy. He plugged in the drive, scanning files, pulling locations, names, weak spots. Then he found it, a name buried deep in syndicate communications. Kryn Derrick. Jack peered over his shoulder. "That means something to you?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "It does now." Kryn wasn't just another enforcer. He was the one calling the shots. And if the syndicate had put Jack in their crosshairs, Kryn was the one who had pulled the trigger. Jack studied his son's expression. "You want him." Ryan pocketed the device, his voice cold. "I want all of them." They left the safe house in flames, the syndicate's foundation shaking beneath them. The hunt wasn't over. It was only beginning. The city never truly slept, but in the hours before dawn, it came close. Street lights flickered against wet pavement, the distant wail of sirens cutting through the quiet. Jack and Ryan moved swiftly through the back alleys, the bar now a war zone they had no intention of returning to. Ryan's side ached from the wound Varric had left him with, but he pushed the pain aside. Injuries were nothing new. What mattered was keeping his father alive. Jack had always been a survivor, but this was different. This wasn't his fight anymore. It was Ryan's. Jack glanced at his son, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion settling into his bones. "They won't stop coming." Ryan nodded. "Then we go to them first." Jack knew what that meant. Ryan wasn't just looking to survive. He was looking to end this. And the only way to do that was to hit the syndicate before they had a chance to regroup. They needed weapons, intel, and an advantage. Ryan knew exactly where to find all three. An hour later, they stood in front of an unassuming warehouse on the edge of the city. It looked abandoned, but Ryan knew better. "This is a bad idea," Jack muttered. Ryan smirked. "It's my specialty." He knocked twice, waited, then knocked once more. A long pause followed. Then the door creaked open just enough for a pair of wary eyes to appear. "Ryan?" The voice was rough, suspicious. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Ryan shrugged. "Need a favor." The man on the other side hesitated, then sighed. "Of course you do. Come in." The warehouse was cluttered with crates of weapons, stacks of ammunition, and gear that didn't exist on any legal registry. The man, Cole, was an old contact, someone Ryan had worked with in the past when missions required equipment that couldn't be traced. Jack surveyed the arsenal with a low whistle. "You always work with this much firepower?" Ryan grabbed a rifle, checking the chamber. "Only when necessary." Cole crossed his arms. "You planning a war?" Ryan met his gaze. "Something like that." Cole's expression darkened. "Word is, the syndicate put a bounty on someone big tonight. High-value target." He glanced at Jack. "Guess I know who." Jack exhaled slowly. "They move fast." Ryan loaded a magazine into the rifle. "So do we..." Cole sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're making enemies you can't afford, Ryan." Ryan smirked. "Wouldn't be the first time." Cole shook his head but tossed him a set of keys. "Truck's out back. Take what you need and disappear." Ryan nodded. "Appreciate it." Jack grabbed a shotgun, testing its weight. "Feels familiar." Ryan glanced at him. "Think you're up for this?" Jack smirked. "Watch and see." They loaded up quickly, moving with the efficiency of men who had done this too many times before. Ryan had been planning a counterstrike, but now, with the bounty on Jack's head, time had run out. The syndicate wasn't going to wait. The first explosion hit just as they pulled onto the street. The shockwave rattled the truck, sending flames and debris into the sky. Ryan swerved hard, narrowly avoiding a second blast as gunfire erupted from the buildings above. "Ambush!" Jack shouted. Ryan didn't need to be told twice. He gunned the engine, weaving through the chaos as syndicate operatives opened fire from rooftops and alleyways. Jack leaned out the window, shotgun barking, taking down a masked figure aiming a rocket launcher. "They're getting desperate." Ryan slammed the brakes, sending two attackers flying over the hood as they tried to block the road. Desperate means sloppy. He spun the wheel, cutting down a side street just as another explosion rocked the area behind them. Their truck fishtailed, tires screeching, but Ryan kept control. Jack reloaded. They weren't just following us. They knew where we were going. Ryan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Which means we've got a leak." "Cole!" It wasn't anger Ryan felt, just disappointment. But it didn't matter now. Right now, survival came first. A black SUV roared up beside them, its windows rolling down just enough for a rifle barrel to poke through. Ryan reacted instantly, slamming the truck into its side, sending it crashing into a lamppost. Sparks flew as metal twisted, but another vehicle took its place. Jack fired first, shattering the windshield, forcing the driver to swerve. Ryan took the opening, accelerating toward an overpass. The moment they hit the incline, he jerked the wheel hard, sending the truck sliding sideways down a narrow access road. The pursuing vehicles overshot the turn, buying them precious seconds. The city lights blurred as they raced toward the outskirts. Jack exhaled. "We need a new plan." Ryan's jaw was set, eyes locked on the road ahead. "We're done running." Jack studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's end this." The calm beacon pulsed in the dim light of the abandoned communications array, each flash carrying a signal that stretched beyond Earth's atmosphere, piercing the silence of the void. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a declaration, a challenge, a spark meant to ignite a war. Ryan stood with his back to the terminal, rifle resting loosely in his grip. His body ached, wounds both fresh and old reminding him of how much he had given to this fight. But there was no stopping now. He had chosen this path the moment the syndicate had come for his father. Jack leaned against a rusted console, watching the signal transmit. His expression was unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. They had won a battle tonight, but the war had only just begun. "Think they'll listen?" Jack asked, nodding toward the beacon. Ryan exhaled, the weight of the moment settling over him. "They don't have a choice." Outside, the city burned. The syndicate had underestimated them, and they had paid the price. But Ryan knew men like them. They wouldn't retreat. They would rebuild, recalibrate, and come back stronger. He wasn't just fighting a group of mercenaries. He was fighting an empire. The screen flickered, an incoming transmission forcing its way through encrypted channels. Ryan stiffened. He hadn't expected a response this quickly. Jack straightened, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. Ryan keyed in a response, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speakers. "You've made quite the mess, soldier." The voice was deep, calm, and unmistakably dangerous. "The Syndicate doesn't take kindly to betrayal." Ryan smirked, his grip tightening on his rifle. "That's funny. I don't take kindly to assassins coming after my father." A low chuckle. "You think you won something tonight?" Ryan's expression hardened. "No, but I've started something." The transmission cut off abruptly. Jack let out a slow breath. That sounded personal. Ryan turned to the beacon, watching as its pulse continued uninterrupted. The message was out there now, spreading across encrypted networks, reaching ears that had long been waiting for a sign. The Syndicate had operated in the shadows for too long. But now, the galaxy was watching. Jack placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, his grip firm. "So what now?" Ryan's eyes never left the beacon. "Now we see who answers." And with that, the signal continued its journey, a message to the stars, one that could never be taken back.